This is a shower redo. I'm not doing a full bathroom renovation, nor am I fixing the shower. I'm actually redoing it the exact same way that it is. Well, kind of exactly. So the reason I was called in on this one, again, there was a leak into the ceiling downstairs, is all the living room area, dining room area, and apparently they had a leak going forward about 6 months. I guess the shower had about 6 months of use before the leak developed. So this was done by the homeowner, and at first glance you're like, oh, okay, not too bad. But there are a lot of issues here that I want to go over. A lot of the reasons, in fact, the main reason I do videos, a lot of the videos I have are on bad bathroom jobs, bad shower jobs with regard to cuts and issues with leaking and things like that, how to negate those things, how to make sure that doesn't happen to you, whether you're doing it on your own or whether you're hiring somebody. And that's the main focus of me doing these type of videos. I'm not going to go through the process unless I find some damage going on here, or unless I find the culprit as to why the shower leaked. I'm not going to go through the process of doing the bill back and all that stuff, because it is what it is. You can't anticipate anything more now than you will 6 days from now, except that this niche will be a little longer. This is a prefab niche, and I'm going to get to that, but so the niche will be longer. And everything is going back. This floor is a rock looking type tile. It's not actually rock, but it looks like it. That's going to be a 2x2 on a mesh. So that's going to be the only difference. The knee wall is going to go back. This rock-like tile is going to go back on this backsplash of the bathtub. And we'll probably cap this off. This is not bullnose, by the way. We'll cap it off with some type of rope or trim or something like that. But that's what they want. They want this rock type tile on the backsplash, and that's what I'm going to go forward with. So those are the only changes that I anticipate. The shower fixture is relatively new, so we're going to leave that. Everything else being equal, everything will be basically looking the same, but I want to go over some of these things. Some of them are aesthetic and some of them aren't. Since I'm on the knee wall already, I'm going to comment on this. There's a lot of things going on with this shower, the least of which is the fact that they used 2 separate tiles and made a line of grout down the center. Even though, and I did take off the shower doors, this is a frameless door enclosure, and I took all that stuff off, and that's why you see all this caulking. But despite the fact that there's caulking on here, there's still a possibility of water penetrating into that line on top of this knee wall. So I would never ever suggest having 2 separate pieces of tile. I would rather have 1 piece of tile. Neither one of these are bullnose, in fact. So what I would do, and I think going forward, what we've decided to do is 1 solid piece of tile going across here. I'm going to have it bullnose on both sides. So aesthetically it will be pleasing, but also it will be 1 solid piece with 1 line down the middle the way he has it now, rather than having this elongated line. So that's a big issue. The other issue is that this is not sloped in any way, shape, or form. And then of course there's lippage on here that you can clearly see. So none of those are a big deal. The cuts on here aren't that great. This grout line goes from 1/4 inch all the way down to almost nothing. Again, that's all aesthetic. There is no there's no touching of the tile whatsoever down here. In fact, the grout line is larger than it really needs to be. There's lippage on this side. This tile is concaved in from that tile. None of this, again, there's a crack going on. There's a separation from this tile to the grout line all the way down. It gets pretty profound, and then these cuts aren't exact up to the edge here. In fact, this one should have been a solid piece rather than 2 separate pieces, but it is what it is. Again, pretty profound lippage going on here, like big time. So a lot of this stuff, again, is aesthetic. The same type of line going on down the center. In fact, they didn't even center this tile. So these tile are 24 inches long, and they used 2 24-inch strips, and then I guess 12 over here, rather than splitting the difference down the middle. And then of course they used 4 tile on here where I would have used 2. with no line down the middle. So again, the aesthetics of it are almost irrelevant. Oh, and the curb is not sloped at all. In fact, if anything, it sloped down this way. And they were even complaining about water coming out this direction and onto the floor. So the slope that does matter. That's not aesthetic, that's practical, and that's not right, and the grout line is huge, and blah, 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 blah. I don't know the reason that this shower leaked, because I don't know how they put it together. Apparently this was a homeowner who did this. Look at that. That's, like, even on my worst day, and I don't even drink, but if I were drinking, I couldn't possibly get the lippage that they have here. That's pretty profound. Grout lines are huge over here, but they're not over here, but then they are down here. And of course the grout is separating for whatever reason. Houses move and separation happens, and not always, but there's some type of reason for this, and I'm not sure why. The cuts aren't that great. So, ooh, look at that. So there's a 1/2 inch, if not 3/4 of an inch between there, and then it just drops down to almost nothing. So there's a lot of issues that, obviously, as a homeowner, if you're doing your own shower, all these things don't really matter, because in the end you're going to be proud of what you did regardless. But as a tiler, and no slope on these, this is a prefab niche, by the way. Anytime I see this 12 by 12 and this little 12 by 6, I already know that it's a prefab type of niche, which I don't do these type of things. I do a custom niche, but anyway, that will go away. But look at the cuts. No splitting the difference on this cut here, and then a solid piece on the bottom. No splitting the difference on the top here, solid piece on the bottom. They're not sloped, either one of them, and this is cockeyed. I can see this is a little shorter than that end. And I don't know why. Oh, I know why that is, because the grout lines are so huge on that side. Again, 90% of this is aesthetic. Like this grout. Like this tapered the grout along this wall here. Like a huge taper grout along the wall. There is no bullnose, and the tile isn't cut even. Like there's a whole 1/4 of an inch between this one and that one. So mostly this is aesthetic. 90%, as I started to say, is probably aesthetic. It could have been done better, but then again, in regard to a homeowner, they don't really care about a lot of this stuff. Some people don't have the higher standards as other people do, and that's okay. Like this cut here, right? Short piece, long piece, offset from that one, and then this one offset from both of those, which again, doesn't really matter. But the whole point is, what happened to cause this leak? I don't know. There is a possibility that because this curb is kind of sloped that way rather than this way, and because there's a gap between the door that was here, that water, we already know, got onto the curb and fell onto the floor, and it could be that it just puddled beneath the grout line onto the Durarock, onto the plywood, and then there begat your problem with the leakage on the ceiling. I don't know how the drain was put together. I don't know if they glued the P-trap. That's a possibility. I've seen it before where they just had a brain fart and didn't ever glue the P-trap, so there's a possibility that happened. Some P-traps are screw-on. Some are actually what they call welded on. They're glued. I always prefer the glued one rather than the screwed one, because the screw does have a tendency of backing off. Not necessarily a screw, but there's a male and a female thread that you tighten it up. So I'm thinking maybe that's the problem, that didn't get screwed down enough, or it's not watertight, and that's why I do the weld one rather than the screw one. It's always a possibility that the pan liner didn't go up enough. It's always a possibility that they perforated the pan below where the shower pan is at, the shower pan material, and if they screwed through the shower pan itself, the liner below this area, and this floor got wet, which most likely it did, then that could be also the problem. I don't know. One of the issues with having a leaky shower is it's almost a mood issue as to what the problem is. Even if you find it, the only way to resolve it is to either rebuild the shower or rebuild the pan. And in this case, I could have done that had the customer wanted me to. I could just go ahead and cut out this first row of tile all the way around, cut out the curb, take out all this material, leave the rest of this shower intact, and then retroactively kind of build things back again the way they're supposed to be, and then it's not going to leak. I know that for a fact because more than likely the leak has to do with this area and has nothing to do with this area. But they decided, since they're going to go to that point of having all that chaos going on, that they were just going to rebuild the shower from scratch because they want to make sure that nothing here has anything to do with the leak, which I know it doesn't, but that's what they want done, and that's what I'm going to do. So I guess the heads up is these things that I point out on my videos, including this one, is to show you some of those things which could happen if you're having a shower built. If you're doing it on your own, you know, horizontal surface should be sloped. The knee wall, the curb, the niches, anywhere there's a horizontal surface should be sloped, including the shower pan. I don't know if this pools it or not. It's not a tile that I would choose for a shower floor. The main reason, even though it looks good, if you don't seal this really well, there's an enormous amount of grout that's going on here, you can see. So even though it looks good in a showroom, the practicality is that you're asking for water penetration to get into your pan. You're just begging for it because there's so much grout going on here. The only way to negate that is to make sure that you seal it very well. I would put at least 3 coats, 4 or 5, 6 hours before between coats, and saturate it with sealer. And then of course this isn't sloped. I can already tell water's pooling over here, and if it's not sealed, it's going to get into your pan and ruin your pan. Did that cause the leak? No, but it will eventually erode the material that your pan is made of, and it will get mold and mildew, and eventually it will just fail, and all these tile will start popping off, and you'll end up scooping up sand in your hand because it's a sand topping mix to start with. So anyway, that's not the focus of the leak. I don't know what the focus of the leak is. All what I just said has nothing to do with the leak, but I'm just letting you know, if you're doing this or having it done, that these are some of the things you don't want to have happen. Your pan, no matter what it's made of, should be sloped down to the drain. Nice even flow down to the drain. It should be sealed well. As I said, there should be slopes on every horizontal surface. Your pan liner should go about, 4 to 6 inches off of your final pan, and it shouldn't be perforated below that at all. Your pan liner should wrap around the curb. Everything should be waterproofed. I doubt very much that any of this stuff is waterproofed, and as I said, it doesn't matter at this point, but these are all the little hotbed issues that I don't want to kind of push across. I'm going to get started on this demo, and if I find anything that just kind of screams out to me this is an issue, then I will definitely show it so that you don't make the same mistake. Interesting little side note that I noticed on this tub as I'm doing the demo. It's not a huge deal, but it kind of sort of does matter in the end. Um, in order for in order for the lip, not the edge of the tub, but the lip of the tub going up, in order for that to be flush, they put in a paint stick because they wanted to be able to put the wallboard straight down onto the tub edge and not the lip, and it's not supposed to go that way. I've mentioned it in a couple of other videos I have before. When you do any bathtub that has this, it's always going to have this going up. This is the lip, the top of the lip, what I call it anyway. This is the edge. The wallboard should never sit on the edge. That's where the tile goes. So rather than bump it out so that everything's flush, which I guess to him made sense, you actually set your wallboard. Find a little piece of tile. If that's wallboard, you set your tile on top of that lip. Then the tile overlaps that onto the edge. The reason is pretty obvious. If you ever have water get up under there and you're caulking, if you don't do the caulking especially, water is going to pool up in this area and it's going to weep up into your wallboard, whatever it is. In this case it's sheetrock, but it doesn't matter what it is, it's all porous and it's all going to weep up and you're going to have problems. That's not maybe, that's a guarantee. So for those of you that ever wanted to know, you know, how things are put together, that's the way it should be put together, not the way he did it here. So FYI. So as I'm doing the demo on this, I'm not too far from where the niche is, about 4 foot up I guess. And I've taken out this piece of what they use hardybacker. So this piece of hardybacker has mold growing on it, and again the shower is only 6 months old. So of course there's no waterproofing, and this mold wouldn't really bother you if there was no waterproof. I mean, if there was waterproofing on it, but then again, you shouldn't be growing mold. It shouldn't not be happening because there should be no moisture back there to begin with. But here's the reason why there is moisture, and I will eventually take off this other 2 feet to find out why the mold went up 3 feet. But here's a good indication right here. Again, hardybacker right at the curb, and you can't tell from the camera. Well, maybe you can if I get 2 different pieces. So you got hardybacker and hardybacker. One is really light, one is really dark because it's wet. It's saturated with water. Because again, and I've emphasized this time and time again on my videos, I keep on saying don't put your backer board into your pan, and constantly I look around on YouTube watching tile guys, experienced tile guys, who I won't mention, put their backer board inside of their pan. They'll do the pan liner and then they'll set their backer board straight to the floor and then pour their pan with it embedded into the pan. So if and when you get moisture into your pan, and most people will to a certain extent, it's going to weep up your backer board, and in this case it went up 3 feet. It's much easier to set it off of your shower pan, give yourself a gap, and put your tile, your floor tile, up under that gap. Don't have the weeping going up and causing mold and mildew issues. This pan is completely saturated with water, which is why this hardybacker is saturated, and probably the curb most likely is too, because they did the same thing. They put their backer board inside here too. So when I get the curb off, I'll most likely there's going to be all kinds of wetness in there too. Yep, roaches like to live in wet environments. Hardybacker is 90% Portland cement. They won't tell you what the other 10% is. But regardless, look how much mold was able to grow, except for where the liner was. Again, because they embedded their backer board into the pan. Totally ridiculous and uncalled for. Not only that, but it's definitely affected the outside wood on this house. At the very bottom, I can feel there's moisture all over this insulation. Look at that. Look how wet that is. right there at the top of the pan liner. And the pan liner goes up from the bottom of the pan a good 8-9 inches, but yet look at all that moisture. Nails are rusted. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I have found where the water leak is coming into the ceiling down below. And with no waterproofing, you see, they didn't, two major things. They didn't wrap the curb. Even if they wrapped underneath, even if they wrapped the 2x4s, which I'm going to find out pretty soon, even if they did that, they failed to do any type of waterproofing on top of here. So when their crappy tile job was done, water was able to penetrate through all the different places where there was grouting on the corners and all this stuff. So obviously, by negating to do any type of waterproofing, they caused a bigger problem than what needed to be done. And especially because all this water now has an opportunity to weep down into the curb. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they didn't wrap the curb. I don't know. I guess I'm going to find out here pretty soon. But regardless, that water is now, even if they wrap the curb, now has an entrance past the pan liner and then down onto the wood floor below. Without a doubt, the wood floor below is saturated same as this is. Without a doubt. I don't know that there's damage to it. It hasn't been that long. But that's how come they have a leak in their ceiling. Huge gap. And look at that. It's just ridiculous. You're just begging water to come in there. It looks like they did wrap their liner. Wrap their liner. It looks like they did wrap their curb. But I'm gonna again go out on a limb and say that the curb is probably saturated. All the 2x4s that are here. Okay. These 2x4s, I can see they're really shiny. Those 2x4s, especially that bottom one, is saturated with water, just saturated, despite the fact that they wrapped their curb. There's no excuse for this. 6 months. A shower that was built 6 months ago now has to be completely taken out because of just lack of knowledge. There's so much knowledge on the internet nowadays. It wasn't like, almost 20 years ago when I started where, you have this at your fingertips. You have this knowledge and just to do stuff like that, really there's no excuse. This is a drain cap. Once this is unscrewed, which I've already unscrewed, I'm gonna just wait a couple of seconds and see if anybody can kind of figure out where the mess up happened, because it's very, very obvious to me, and because I do this so often, I don't know if it's going to be obvious to you. There are 3 pieces to a drain. One of them is your drain cap, which goes on last. The second one that goes on is your drain flange. The drain flange is put there on top of the liner by virtue of 4 bolts I had already mentioned earlier. Where do you see the 4 bolts at? There is no 4 bolts. The 4 bolts are probably on the flange underneath this liner. Well, they are, because I can feel that one, and I can feel that one, and I can feel that one, and this one. But they're supposed to go through the second flange. The first one goes to the floor. The second flange goes on top of the pan liner. The little X's get cut out. The bolts go through so that the second flange pushes this liner down. And there are no bolts. They kind of did it back-assward. In fact, it wasn't even back-assward. It's just period wrong. This is the main problem. So this shower is finally finished. It took about 7 days, roughly, to take all of this material out, start over from scratch again, and build it back the right way. And I say the right way because everybody has their opinion on how the shower looks, and ultimately it doesn't matter because it belongs to the customer, not me or you. So it doesn't really, but this is how he wanted it, and so that's the way it is. There are a couple of things that, in regard to how the shower was done originally, that caused it to be done again. One of them is that this rock tile, this what I call fake rock tile, because it doesn't have the bump outs that real rock does. It's actually shaved down. This tile was used on the floor, and if you remember in the first video, it was very wavy. It was done wrong, and it's not, you know, everybody has their recommendation as far as what they would want in their shower. I would never use this for a shower floor because of the huge discrepancy between these tile. I'm going to call them tile for the time being. There is big grout lines. Anytime you have a lot of grout lines in your shower floor, that's the Achilles heel of a shower. That's a way for water to get in. If water's going to get in and damage your floor, which is always the case when I take out showers that fail, it's not because tile are falling off the wall. You know, it's not because things are falling apart. It's because the shower pan is saturated and or leaking, and this is one of the things you could preclude that from happening by not having that much grout. So in this case, they came back with a 2x2. Oh, by the way, this is the same shower. I'll link it at the bottom in the description box. This is the same shower where they had done the horrible pre-slope and they had done the pan liner over the drain. In fact, the drain flange was down below. Both of them were down below, and the pan liner was over it. So I will link that video down below because that was pretty horrific. In fact, that's what caused the leak downstairs to begin with, is that issue. And there was a lot of things that weren't done right. There was a lot of slope down at the end of this area. I think he had complained about water falling off of the top of the curb because it was sloped in and out rather than over and into the shower. So we've eliminated a lot of those problems, obviously, by doing it over again. The other issue he had was a lot of lippage. This tile, this wall tile that was already up, had a lot of profound lippage, as does the floor, because I didn't do anything to the floor. I don't know if you can see it, but well, you can see it better this way. There's a lot of lippage on this floor, and it's everywhere. And it was also in the shower because they made the fatal mistake of sticking the tile straight to the wall. Anytime you have, especially a large format tile like this, anytime you have this, you have to both trowel out your thin set on the wall, and you have to back butter your tile, which begets a much larger area between the tile and the wall. So when you try and do it flat to the wall, you have no manipulation, you have no play, and because tile are uneven, because walls are uneven, that's why you end up, even on the floor, with lippage. And so there was a lot of lippage on this, on these walls. So that's eliminated. We also took the tile up to the ceiling, which it wasn't before. It went up to the shower head. We also did some bullnose around the top and around the edge over here. Also did some bullnose tile on the top of this knee wall, and that finishes it off a lot better than what it was. The knee wall wasn't set in place well. There was a lot of bad cuts on the knee wall. I think I mentioned that on the last video. There was a lot of bad cuts over here, and so we just lined everything up. In fact, in order to line everything up, I suggested putting up some window casing, which I did. That way we have a straight line to follow where the separation from the tub and the shower is as much as possible. So there's about a 2-inch discrepancy, but that's not bad. And then just went ahead with this rock tile that he wanted on here, setting on top of the tub. And then of course the bullnose around the back end of it. This is not, again, my recommendation. My recommendation, if you remember the first video, would have been to have at least a 2 or 3 inch piece of tile running along the bottom, not so much to trim it out or to border it the way this is bordered, but also because there is possible water penetration that could get through that grout. Should water get into that grout and set on the lip of that tub, then it could just stagnate there. And so I suggested having that strip of tile going across, and they declined. They wanted it straight down to the tub, so it is what it is. Anyway, getting back to the shower, managed to get the fixture back in the way it was, managed to do a niche that is much more palatable than the other one was. If you remember, that was a prefab niche and it had 2 little pocket areas. In fact, that was a foam niche. The foam was about that thick, and to me it was very, very poorly done. I would never have done that type of prefab niche anyway. It was not really functional. It wasn't a lot of room, so we got a bigger niche in there. And as I said before already, the 2x2 tile on the floor rather than the rock tile, and that is much better. And it is also and then of course the curb got some bull nose as well, and obviously sloped inward, as I've already mentioned. The glass got put back up, 2 panels anyway. The door wasn't able to fit, and that gets me back to what I started with on the video, is that when you do the build up the way it's properly done, you have about probably 3/8 or so of build up, maybe a little less than that, maybe about 1/4 of an inch of build up of your thin set on the back of the tile. So the end result is that we're off on the door by 3/8 of an inch. Again, you know, the tile was set straight to the wall, and the tile was set straight to the knee wall, and so it was a little bit wider area than what it is now, so the door has to be replaced. The panels were salvageable. I was able to get the mat down to where this panel still fit, and the back panel still fit, but the door won't. So part of the mistake of doing the tile wrong was now that a new door has to be ordered because it won't fit, the old one won't fit. Which is unfortunate, because there was a lot of money spent on this to have to do it twice, and it shouldn't be that way. You should only have to build your shower once in the lifetime that you're going to be in the house. And in this case, it's already been done 3 times, from the original to the bad job, and then from the bad job to this one. And so, you know, 3 times later, it's a lot of money to have to spend. But it is what it is, and it's finished, and I am out of here, and I am on to the next job. So anyway, I hope you got some information from here. Again, my reiteration is to make sure that you get the job done right the first time, so you don't have to spend a second or a third time on something that you shouldn't have to spend.